Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a truly explosive set of claims that have recently surfaced, and honestly, it's a wild ride. We're looking at a fascinating intersection here: high-level political demands for absolute military transparency regarding unidentified craft, colliding with some intense spiritual commentary that's grown up around these revelations. We are drawing directly from a recent eye-opening interview involving U.S. Congressman Tim Burchett, and combining that with some really compelling theological interpretations from YouTube commentator Elijah Zielke. So we're talking government secrets, deeply credible military witness accounts, and some profound spiritual hypotheses. Let's jump right in. This quote right here, this gets to the absolute heart of why this issue is suddenly everywhere. The push for transparency is hitting a total boiling point at the highest levels of government. Congressman Burchett is forcefully arguing that unelected officials are hoarding world-changing information, basically out of an arrogant assumption that the public would just panic. But elected representatives are stepping up. They're demanding that the secrecy ends right now. They're just sick of the American public being kept in the dark about where tens of millions of dollars are going and what exactly is operating up in our skies. Section 1. The push for disclosure, demanding the truth. And this demand isn't just talk anymore. It's moving into formal action, stemming directly from recent presidential directives to the War Secretary to actually prepare the release of classified files. Okay, let's just make sure we're defining our terms here, because the language around all of this has shifted. We aren't really talking about UFOs in that classic 1950s sci-fi sense anymore. The official modern term utilized by the government, the military, and the intelligence community is UAP, unexplained aerial phenomena. And this rebranding is absolutely crucial. It moves the conversation away from, little green men and focuses heavily on the actual documented data. We're talking about precise phenomena that our most sophisticated tracking technologies are picking up, but that our top scientists literally still cannot explain. Section 2. Close encounters and UAPs. What are they seeing? So, we're shifting now from the political demands to the specific, highly credible accounts coming from top-tier military personnel. According to the classified briefings, the military isn't just tracking one type of anomalous craft. There's a whole variety out there. You've got the classic saucer shapes that completely match historical reports. Then you have these formations that the scientific community might describe as plasma. There are also distinct wedge-shaped craft. And finally, there's this whole category of completely unknown, utterly silent anomalies that seemingly defy our current understanding of aerodynamics and propulsion. To really understand the sheer scale of what we're dealing with, just consider this incredibly vivid anecdote shared by the congressman. A former Navy personnel recounted an incident where a circular craft hovered directly over the deck of their ship. And get this, the craft was described as being roughly the size of 2 city blocks. 2 city blocks! But what makes this truly mind-bending is that despite its massive hulking size, it took off without generating a single sound or creating any physical disturbance in the air or the water around it. No exhaust, no sonic boom, just silent, impossible acceleration. Section 3. The deep water anomalies, beneath the surface. Because while we naturally look up for unexplained phenomena, highly credible military reports suggest we should absolutely be looking down too. Now, these aren't just isolated, random occurrences. A United States Navy admiral actually informed the congressman that there are exactly 5 deep water areas off the U.S. coast that are absolute hotspots for these anomalies. Just 5. And these specific areas have a massive concentration of sightings both in the airspace directly above them and deep beneath the waves themselves. And the data points gathered beneath the water, they are staggering. Our military has documented cases on sonar where submerged craft, described as being the size of a football field, are tracked traveling at speeds of over 200 miles per hour underwater. To put that into perspective, the sheer physics of moving an object that massive through the dense resistance of water at that speed without tearing it to pieces, well, it's currently impossible for human engineering. As Congressman Burchett pointed out, it's this glaring reality that we actually know more about the surface of the moon than we do about these anomalous deep water zones right off our own coastlines. Section 4. The government cover-up, secrets and intimidation. With all of this highly credible data floating around, you really have to ask, why on earth isn't this common knowledge? Well, you see, highly trained professionals are aggressively disincentivized from coming forward. If a military pilot reports a UAP sighting, they aren't celebrated for their vigilance. Instead, they face immediate, severe repercussions. First off, they're often pulled right off the flight line, halting their immediate duties. Second, they're forced to undergo a psychological evaluation, basically implying that they're unstable simply for reporting what their instruments and their own 2 eyes saw. And finally, they receive a permanent blemish on their military record. The entire system is completely designed to silence them. So the crucial takeaway here is the systemic nature of this alleged cover-up. According to the congressman, witnesses, like those Navy sailors who saw that two-city block craft, were met by men in suits with briefcases and outright told they'd be busting rocks for the rest of their life if they breathed a word of it. Burchett also described immense bureaucratic friction, colorfully noting that unelected bureaucrats, who he described as a punk with a man bun, are gatekeeping information, even putting the President of the United States on a need-to-know basis. Furthermore, when UAPs have hovered over nuclear facilities causing complete shutdowns, the government officially claims they have no data points. It's just this massive wall of denial, guarded so fiercely that the congressman himself requires personal security due to constant death threats just for speaking out. Because of this intense gatekeeping, there's deep skepticism that the federal government will ever willingly release any meaningful truth. When previous reports were mandated to be shared, Burchett described the documents as looking like, quote, somebody shot it with a 12-gauge. The pages were just completely blacked out, full of nothingness and redactions, with only a few legible sentences slipping through. There is a very real fear that the upcoming release of files is going to suffer the exact same fate, just hiding the reality behind endless walls of black ink. Section 5, a spiritual interpretation beyond the stars. Now, as these military mysteries capture the public's attention, YouTube commentator Elijah Zielke takes the discussion in a totally different direction, moving from a physical mystery to a profound theological hypothesis. And this is a highly relevant conversation to have, because the public mindset is already primed for the extraordinary. Polls indicate that over 55% of the population already believes that something else is out there. This means that as more UAP footage leaks and as more of these brave pilots come forward, understanding the origins of these craft is becoming an absolutely crucial conversation that crosses right over into different cultural and belief systems. Which brings us to a massive divide in how we actually interpret this phenomenon. The standard pop culture theory, of course, assumes intergalactic aliens. But interestingly, both the congressman and the commentator express deep skepticism about this, noting the frankly incomprehensible physics required to travel millions of light years. Instead, they lean towards an earthbound or spiritual realm theory. Zielke posits that these entities haven't traveled from a distant galaxy at all. Rather, they've been here all along, representing a collision between our earthly reality and an unseen spiritual realm. The spiritual interpretation argues that these aren't new visitors. Actually, they map perfectly onto human history. Zielke looks all the way back to ancient times, citing the book of Genesis and the separation of realms. He points to the biblical era, specifically the prophet Ezekiel's vision of a wheel within a wheel coming down from the sky. He argues that ancient people were essentially describing these highly advanced localized phenomena using the limited technological vocabulary they had at the time. Fast forward to the modern day, and we are seeing exactly the same descriptions: silent, hovering, completely unexplainable craft. Ultimately, the spiritual commentary reaches a very specific conclusion, captured perfectly in this quote from the host. We do not battle against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and the rulers in the unseen realm. From this perspective, the government's inability to understand these craft isn't just a failure of science, it's a failure of categorization. The commentator views these UAP encounters not as extraterrestrial scientists, but as actual evidence of an active, unseen spiritual reality that the Bible has discussed for millennia, warning that this phenomena might be preparing the world for a grand, impending deception. Which leaves us standing at a truly fascinating crossroads. On one hand, we have undeniable radar data, terrified fighter pilots, and Congress demanding transparency on a massive intelligence cover-up. On the other hand, we have compelling arguments that our modern scientific framework might be entirely inadequate to explain entities that have hovered over humanity since antiquity. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Are we witnessing the slow leak of a highly classified nuts and bolts military mystery? Or are these UAPs the leading edge of a profound spiritual reality finally bleeding over into our own? The push for disclosure continues, and the answer might change how we view our universe entirely. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep your eyes on the skies and definitely on the data.